Okay, it is noon, so we are going to get started with today's event. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Jumpstart Your Career in Electricity. I'm Michelle Brannigan, and I'm the CEO of Electricity Human Resources Canada. We're delighted to welcome you all to our virtual event today. We have a dynamic lineup of speakers from across the sector, whom we've invited specifically for the diversity of career paths and educational backgrounds that they represent. Canada's electricity sector is made up of an astonishing variety of jobs, and today you're going to gain some insight into just how many people are doing different kinds of work and are involved in keeping our communities powered across the country every single day. People from the iconic power line occupation, of course, the technicians that you see working on the wires, to cybersecurity specialists, and even occupational divers, and not one that most people would actually think of it. And all those occupations require both a combination of technical skills and professional skills, such as collaboration, communication, critical thinking, to complete their jobs safely. And I'll emphasize here that when these professional skills are extremely important for employers and a real differentiator when it comes to being hired and to staying hired. Just this past year, our Empowering Future Wage Subsidy Program for student work placements has funded placements in jobs such as grid analytics, finance, international business development, electrical technology, R&D, clean energy design, business market research, industrial safety. The list goes on and on. And then what's more, with the increasing complexity and integration of digital systems into our electricity infrastructure and the shift to renewable sources, we're going to see new jobs emerge in this sector, jobs that don't even exist today. At EHRC, it's our job to keep on top of that through our labor market research, our programs, and our partnerships with employers and educators. And we're proud to work alongside a sector that is constantly innovating and developing creative and resilient solutions to the most pressing challenges we face today. And those challenges are going to need people like you. It's a really exciting time to get involved. We're glad that all of you could make the time to join us today to be a part of the discussion. I'd like to thank all of today's guests for being here to share their time and insights. I know you're going to enjoy it. And with that, I'm going to thank everybody and hand you over to our moderator for today's event, and that is Alex Hoslett, who is the EHRC Manager of Marketing and Communications. Over to you, Alex.
Oh, sorry about that. I just read that. Technical hurdles, everyone. Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. As your moderator today, I'll be introducing today's speakers as well as taking questions from the audience. You can use the Q&A feature in Zoom to submit your questions during our question periods, and we'll do our best to get through as many as we can. With that, I would like to introduce our first speaker today. Michelle George is Vice President of Engineering and Storage and Transmission Operations for Enbridge Gas Inc. and is a member of Enbridge's executive leadership team. In her current role, Michelle is accountable for the safe and reliable operations of the gas storage, compression, and transmission business in Ontario, as well as the engineering, asset management, and integrity functions for Enbridge Gas to ensure compliance, reduce risk, and optimize our assets. Michelle has been with Enbridge for over 25 years and has held roles in engineering and construction, field operations, and centralized support functions in Ontario and Texas. Michelle was named one of Canada's most powerful women top 100 by the Women's Executive Network in 2019. She is a professional engineer and graduated from McMaster University with a Bachelor of Civil Engineering and Management. She lives in Aurora, Ontario with her husband and 2 kids. Michelle, thank you for joining us today and for bearing with me with my technical challenges. If you want to turn on your video, I'll bring up your presentation.
Thank you, Alex, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here with you today. I understand there are over 350 people registered, and I saw over 100 people have joined already from all over Canada, which I think is really exciting. I thought I'd start by sharing a little about Enbridge and about my career, and then I'm really looking forward to taking some of your questions. One of the goals of the Young Energy Professionals Initiative is to provide a forum where talented young professionals can broaden their connections in the energy sector, tapping into a diverse network of people, deepening their knowledge of energy issues, and developing into the energy leaders of tomorrow. I know that most of you are from the electricity sector, but Alex tells me you're curious to know more about the broader energy industry and might be wondering what it would be like to work for a natural gas utility like Enbridge Gas. So that's what I'm going to talk about. I'll tell you what it's been like to work as an engineer for Enbridge. about the many opportunities I've had over the years and some of the lessons that I've learned. But first, I want to start with a question. So if you can give me an invisible show of hands, when you make decisions about your career, how important is diversity in your decision making? I'll come back to this question in a few minutes, but right now, let me tell you a little about Enbridge. If you want to go to the next slide. I joined Enbridge after graduating from McMaster with a Bachelor of Civil Engineering and Management, and that was over 25 years ago, and I've never looked back. You'd think that in order to work on a pipeline or a compressor station that I would have needed to be a mechanical engineer, but that's the first thing to know about Enbridge and the energy industry in general. Not only are there opportunities here for all kinds of engineering disciplines, civil, electrical, environmental, there's also a broad range of career possibilities. Everything from technical field roles in operations and construction, to customer-facing jobs in business development and marketing, to support functions like IT, finance, law, and human resources. The diversity of career opportunities is one of the best parts about working for Enbridge, which is partly due to our size, but also because of our ambition to be a leader in the energy sector. It takes all kinds of people with all types of experience to build a successful organization. I currently work for Enbridge Gas, and we're the largest natural gas storage, transmission, and distribution utility in North America. We're owned by Enbridge Inc., which is a Canadian-based leader in energy transportation and distribution. Enbridge Gas exists to deliver the energy that enhances people's quality of life, and we've done it for more than 170 years. We have about 3,500 employees in Ontario, and we deliver affordable, reliable energy to 3.8 million residential, commercial, and industrial customers in Ontario, to over 355 municipalities and 21 Indigenous communities. We manage $25 billion in assets, including 147,000 kilometers of pipelines, which is enough to circle the world 3.5 times, and 280 billion cubic feet of gas storage at our Dawn Hub. If you go to the next slide, please. Moving out from Ontario and the Ontario-based utility to Enbridge as a whole, Enbridge is North America's leading energy infrastructure company. We've built our name by safely delivering energy to consumers and markets across North America through our natural gas distribution systems, our vast network of oil pipelines, and renewable energy facilities like wind and solar. Enbridge has 4 business units. In addition to the natural gas utility in Ontario, we have an extensive network of more than 39,000 kilometers of natural gas transmission pipelines. And we also operate the world's largest and most complex oil and liquids transportation system with more than 27,000 kilometers of pipelines across North America. And our renewable energy portfolio, which spans both North America and Europe, includes 20 wind farms, 4 solar energy operations, 5 waste heat recovery facilities, a geothermal project, and a hydroelectric facility. If you go to the next slide, it sums up the main points about our business. We transport about 25% of the crude oil produced in North America, and we also transport over 20% of the natural gas consumed in the United States. And our renewable energy facilities generate 1,750 megawatts of zero emission energy, enough to power nearly 700,000 homes. And last but not least, Enbridge has won all kinds of awards, including the Bloomberg Gender Equity Index, Forbes America's Best Employers for Diversity, the Indigenous Excellence Award, and Canada's Top 100 Employers 17 times. All of this is to say, I'm proud to work for Enbridge. I'm doing work that I love, work that's rewarding, and work that's making a difference in a very complex energy world. If you go to the next slide, one of the things that makes me most proud to work at Enbridge, and this is true for the entire energy industry, is the focus on safety. The safety of our neighbors, employees, communities, and the environment is our #1 concern. If we don't get safety right, nothing else matters. Our commitment to safety was never more important than this year in our response to COVID-19. We responded immediately to the crisis, enacting our incident command structure, working from home where we can, and implementing COVID protocols to continue performing our essential services. We're continuing to do our part to prevent the spread of COVID-19 while ensuring that families and businesses have the energy we all rely on, now more than ever. Next slide. While our business supports the quality of life for millions of people every day, we're also focused on future impacts. In fact, for Enbridge, the energy future is more efficient, more stable, and more important than ever. Why do I say that? Well, within the next 20 years, the global population is expected to grow to more than 9 billion people from 7.7 billion today. Energy demand is set to increase by 25%, and continued economic development depends on access to more of the affordable and reliable energy that we deliver. It's a great time to be in the energy industry. We're preparing for tomorrow right now, and we're doing it through investments that will provide cleaner energy sources, resulting in a modernized infrastructure network that will support the energy and environmental needs of future generations. Let me give you some examples. In Ontario, Enbridge Gas is innovating to advance lower carbon natural gas solutions that can provide an immediate and affordable way to achieve meaningful carbon reductions. Our efforts focus on 3 areas. First, conservation for our customers. Since 1995, our energy efficiency programs have reduced customer consumption by 28 billion cubic meters of natural gas, which has resulted in a reduction of 51 million tons of greenhouse gas emissions. We're also looking at cleaner technologies for heat and transportation, such as compressed natural gas and geothermal. And we have some exciting projects in green fuels, like carbon neutral renewable natural gas and hydrogen. So let me tell you just a little more about those 2. Next slide. Hydrogen is one of the areas in which Enbridge is playing a lead role. Our 2 megawatt power to gas plant in Markham was the first and largest in North America when it was built in 2018. It's a grid stabilization plant that helps to balance electricity on the provincial grid. Essentially, we take the surplus electricity that Ontario often generates and produce hydrogen using electrolysis technology. The hydrogen gas that results from this process is stored and can be converted back into electricity when needed. The green hydrogen from the plant can also be injected into our pipeline to blend with traditional natural gas. We just received approval from the Ontario Energy Board, our regulator, for a pilot to blend renewable hydrogen into a small portion of our grid with no cost to customers. Construction is planned for next year, and this will be the first hydrogen blending in the natural gas system in North America. It's been a very exciting project for our engineering team, leading the way for the industry to assess the risks, develop the engineering requirements, design the new facilities, learn from others around the world, and apply those learnings to our system. Next slide. Enbridge is also actively working to support the development of renewable natural gas, otherwise known as biogas, captured from landfill, organic waste, and wood waste. RNG is a great way to affordably and practically reduce emissions, especially for municipalities that operate fleets of garbage trucks and buses. We've partnered with the City of Hamilton to use RNG to fuel city buses, and with the City of Toronto to harvest methane from organic waste to fuel waste collection trucks and reduce the city's fuel costs. Although the technical requirements for these projects are similar to those of our existing assets, RNG has also been an exciting opportunity to design, construct, commission, and operate new facilities. Next slide. Now, back to the question I asked at the beginning of my presentation. When you make decisions about your career, how important will the diversity of the opportunity be in your decision making? I'm asking because for me, it played a huge part. Diversity of experience has defined my career. It's what kept me motivated and energized and happy in the work that I've been doing for the last 25 years. All dimensions of diversity matter a great deal within Enbridge, which is why we track our progress on dashboards that every employee can access. They're updated quarterly to show ethnic and racial minority, gender, and disability representation in our organization. But diversity is one half of the equation. Inclusion is just as important. We want every employee to feel like they can bring their authentic selves to work every day. Our diversity and inclusion strategy is endorsed by the highest levels of the organization. And more importantly, it's supported by grassroots employee groups who are working to create an environment where all employees have access to the same opportunities that I've had in my career with Enbridge. Opportunities I hope that you have too, wherever you take your career. For me, diversity means more than being a female engineer. I'm proud that 34% of Enbridge employees in Canada are women, and that women account for 40% of the membership of our board of directors. But diversity is also about your lived experience, which comes from having different perspectives. I've been really fortunate to have had some great opportunities. So that's the first thing I would look for in a career in energy, or any career. Will it provide diversity of experience? When I accepted the job at Union Gas in Waterloo, I'm not sure I could have predicted the path my career would take. Despite being with the same company for my entire career, I've had 15 jobs in 8 locations with 6 moves in 2 countries and 3 business units. I've had to adapt and change. In each new role, I noticed that my perspective changed, sometimes quite significantly. And this was important because it allowed me to build my strategic perspective and learn how to develop strong teams. My first 15 years were spent in the distribution operations business, where I moved around and did pretty much every job there was, including construction, field operations, supervision, engineering, and centralized process support. I moved from Waterloo to Chatham to Hamilton and back to Chatham, and I developed an appreciation for the need to operate safely and what happens if we don't, for the value of good customer service, the complexity of the energy industry, and the rewards and challenges of leadership. In 2012, I moved into my last role at Union Gas, the Director of Major Projects. And this was my introduction to large, complex capital construction projects, where I brought together the diversity of my experience from early in my career with my technical background, my strategic perspective, and my leadership skills in order to engage a new team tasked with delivering $2 billion of pipeline and compression projects over a 3-year period. From there, I had the opportunity to move with my family to Houston to work with Spectra Energy's Major Projects Group, where I led the project development team. Although the work was similar, this move highlighted for me the value of diversity of thought. It was a huge career change, much bigger both personally and professionally than any of my previous moves. It was a different country, a different culture, and even a different corporate culture. But I felt valued and included and even appreciated for sharing my different perspectives. In 2017, Enbridge bought Spectra Energy, and I had the opportunity to move back to Ontario to take on the Vice President of Engineering role and ultimately lead the engineering, integrity, asset management, and construction teams through the amalgamation of the 2 largest natural gas utilities in Canada, Union Gas and Enbridge Gas Distribution. The point of telling you all of this is that throughout your career, you'll probably have many different jobs, and that's a good thing. It's really important to take time to learn what energizes you and to seek out the diverse experiences you need in order to stay energized. I completely agree with this quote on the slide. The things that make us different are also our superpowers. The reality is people who have different backgrounds and experiences simply make better decisions together. And everyone wants to work for an organization with an inclusive environment that promotes diversity of thought. Thank you for the opportunity to share my experiences with you today. I hope I've given you some insight into career opportunities into the energy industry. And if you go to the next slide, I'd be happy to take some questions now if you have any.
Sounds good. Let me just get these questions up here. So thank you so much for sharing all of your different experience with us. Your story is really incredible, and I'm grateful that everyone could hear it today. So we're going to take some questions. For anyone watching, if you have questions for Michelle, please share them in the Q&A on Zoom. We can get started with a few that we have here. So Michelle, Enbridge is working on a lot of exciting and really innovative projects that you've described, really interesting carbon neutral renewable gas projects, for example. What are some of the emerging roles that you'll expect you'll need for the future and able to facilitate this?
You know, it's a great question and something we talk about quite frequently. Do we need, what skills are we looking for? What are we looking for differently? And I will say one trend in our industry is definitely digitization and how to better use technology, for example, of data and records. So using AI, machine learning to leverage the data that we already have in the records that we have on our assets into useful information for analytics and predictive modeling. So I think there's all kinds of opportunities in the future around those areas.
Good. We've got some questions coming in here. I'm going to try to blend some of the ones that we have coming together. So you've had a really amazing career, as you've described, with all sorts of different business units and moves and everything. You started as an engineer and you've moved up all the way to being vice president. So I'm curious to hear about the kinds of maybe on-the-job learning that you've done to be able to grow into that. One question asker asked, how much did your job relate directly to your undergraduate program? And I feel like you've probably built a lot on since there.
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say that a big part of, I talked a lot about my career and all the different roles I had, so definitely had a lot of on-the-job training. When I started, how applicable was my undergraduate degree to what I was doing? I was working on plastic pipe, so there was definitely some applicability in the civil engineering disciplines to what I was doing. But it was also in many ways like speaking a different language. And I remember finally having some conversations I was in operations, and so having some conversations with the engineering people who were speaking my language about uniform distributed load instead of talking about staking out the running line along the property line. So, there was a lot of applicability of the concepts and the theory, but I wouldn't say that what I had was directly applicable to what I was doing. But on the job training, stepping outside my comfort zone to take on new accountabilities. One of the things that I did in many of my role changes was developing 90-day plans. So that would push me to think about, what do I need to learn to take on this accountability? What do I want to accomplish while I'm in this role, which may or may not be directly affected by the role? And what value do I bring to the table? So how can I bring value to the team?
Sounds good. We have sort of a similar question about some of your motivations for this. What asks, what was it that sort of kept you motivated to make such big decisions throughout your career? You've done so much and it's been really dynamic. What is it that drives you in your career?
So it's a great question. I think for me, early on I realized the value of getting different perspectives. So I'm a very detailed thinker. I like digging into the new opportunities and understanding what's really required for the role. But I also really liked understanding how my problem or my issue was impacted by others in the organization, others in the industry, or in the community. And so recognizing that the best way to get a different perspective is often to really walk in the shoes. I decided to move around and try different roles. And then the more I did it, the more I loved it. So, it makes my job in the role that I have now so much easier, that I've had all these different perspectives, worked with all these different people, and I'm able to connect the dots, which I really see as a core leadership accountability.
That sounds good. I'm going to try to combine a couple questions that we're getting here because there's some interest in environmental systems engineering and questions about what the future of sustainability looks like for Enbridge. And I think the talk that you had about your renewable projects was really, really interesting. And I think a lot of young people that are tuning in today are really excited to hear about that kind of work. So what do you see as sort of like some of the next big frontiers, maybe in hydrogen, and what kinds of people do you think that you'll need for those?
Yeah, so I covered what really, and some of the key areas that Enbridge Gas is focused on around hydrogen, renewable natural gas. It's really looking at how to integrate the energy systems is another topic that we're looking at. Understanding sort of where the future of energy is going and how our infrastructure and how our skill sets can add value. So, I think any of the organizations, including Enbridge, we're really looking for innovative thinking. We're looking for people who are able to change their perspectives, to open their minds to different opportunities. But then also a lot of the core technical skill sets are really a foundational requirement in order to be able to do that. So you need the core technical background that you're getting whether in the energy education that you're getting, the electricity sector, or any kind of engineering that you're getting, in order to be able to really identify those different opportunities.
That's good. I really love that you have your diversity numbers, and you talked about how Enbridge is 34% women and 40% on the board, which is wonderful. You're actually a leg up above a lot of the industry standard right now, and we know that we've made progress, especially in recent years, and there's a lot more work to do. So I'd like to ask what advice you have for young women who are considering a career in engineering or in energy in general.
So, I do get asked this question a fair bit, and I have to say that, as I've said a few times, I've been in the industry for a long time, 25 years. There were many situations where I was the only woman in the room or the only woman on the job site. But I have to say that I never considered leaving the industry. I saw it as an opportunity to demonstrate my skills, to show what I can do. And I actually found it quite energizing, and it gave me an opportunity to stand out. But the advice that I would give is the advice that I would give to females or to anyone. If you are ever feeling, alone or feeling isolated or even feeling excluded in the situation that you're in, seek out allies, seek out mentors. I found that there was always someone who could relate to what I was going through or empathize with what I was experiencing. And it's really important to have that foundation to be able and have someone that you can talk to about how you're feeling, because I do believe that the times have changed a lot. I believe diversity and inclusion are valued across the industry. And we all need to work towards getting there. And so there are a lot of people who are very, very supportive.
It's great to hear. I'm going to put a twist on one of the questions here because a lot of people are curious about the kinds of technologies and innovation. We have a question about the use of 3D printing as an example. There's so much new technology that changes the way things were done even 10 years ago right now. From these different kinds of emerging tools, how do you see them having an impact on the way that the future of doing work in energy as a utility at Enbridge Gas?
So that's a great question. I'm not sure. I don't have a lot of experience on 3D printing, so I'm not going to really head down that path. But at Enbridge, we've actually opened up some technology and innovation labs. We have one in Calgary, one in Houston, and then we have roaming opportunities, so Toronto and Edmonton. And it's really to take a look at some of the problems that we have, and particularly around safety, integrity, environment, those types of things, and take a look at them differently using the agile thinking, and then and agile thinking and sprints to really, and I touched on this a little bit earlier, but take the data. We have a lot of data. I think the energy industry, any asset-based industry, is data heavy, but how do you take that data from disparate systems, bring it together, often with machine learning and AI, to be able to turn it into something useful and react quickly and be able to further improve the safety in our industry.
One of the recurring questions that's coming up a lot is you have a lot of fellow civil engineer fans in the chat that are curious about your work at Enbridge, basically, and I think they'd like to hear a little bit more about sort of what for a civil engineer, what does it look like working at a company like Enbridge Gas in the energy sector?
So if you're asking about specific civil engineering, so actually doing the civil engineering, when we build compressor plants, the civil engineering is the same as really any building. So you're all the geotechnical, all of the foundations and the buildings. There's a lot of fluid dynamics that is also connected to civil engineering. But I will say that there's opportunity for all disciplines across the energy industry. There isn't as much where you have to be as a specific discipline. We definitely have that. We're professional engineers, we're stamping drawings. Some of the roles are quite specialized, but I think there's also a lot of breadth of opportunity for any discipline. We have mining engineers, we have aerospace engineers, we have every kind of systems engineers, we have every kind of engineer that there is working in our engineering department, as well as we have engineers in business development and marketing and all the different roles that we have in our company.
That sounds great. a good question that we have up here, because you've worked in both Canada and the United States, is sort of where the value of international experience is and what it's like being able to go between countries that maybe have different regulations, different codes, different policies. Um, what's been your experience with that like? And what do you think about individuals that are maybe coming from international backgrounds and how they can blend perspectives from different countries working in Canada or elsewhere?
Yeah, another great question, because my international experiences with the United States, which you would think wouldn't be that different, really, is what my experience was. I thought, well, this won't be that complicated. And I had worked with my colleagues in the US quite a bit. But when you get into some of the details, specifics around code, standards, regulations for projects around permitting, it's quite amazing how different they can be. And so I think it's important to really quickly be able to connect the core concepts, the first principles of engineering, the core concepts of engineering and energy development and energy work are not different. And so where I've seen a lot of success is when people are able to make those connections. And then, as I highlighted, really valuing different perspectives and understanding that the way something was done in another country may actually work very well here. We had a lot of opportunity with the hydrogen blending project to work with European countries because they're blending hydrogen into their natural gas streams. They've been doing it for longer and at higher percentages. So energy is a global industry, and having that international experience can be very valuable, but it is really about being able to connect it to what's happening.
Sounds good. We've got a question here that actually touches on something that's important to us at EHRC, and I think you'll have a really great perspective on this. We invest a lot in developing what we call professional skills, so communication, project management, organization, those kinds of interdisciplinary skills that complement some of the technical or hard skills in succeeding. So, coming from an engineering background and now to a vice president role, what do you think has helped you the most in terms of those sorts of soft skills or professional skills, and how do you recommend that young people entering the field can grow those?
So for me personally, very early on in my career, a few years in, I moved into a supervision role, which was really focused on leadership. And I think that, and I was supervising unionized field employees who had significantly more experience than I had. And I think that the ability to lead people, whether it's in a formal supervisory role, people leader role, or whether it's in a project type role, it's a great way to develop a lot of those broader skills: communication, the ability to connect to understand other people's perspectives, other people's drivers, what engages them, what motivates them, which is what you really need in order to be able to deliver results, to get your concepts through, to get your projects delivered. So I think that that's a really, really critical skill set. I know I did talk a lot about technical skills, and I'm very excited about technical things as well. And I know that is a big excitement for people in the industry. But without being able to communicate and work with people in order to drive the initiatives or the projects or the ideas forward, it can really impact the effectiveness. So it is absolutely critical. There's also a lot of training programs. I've had all kinds of leadership opportunities to go to leadership training. I've had opportunities to do presentation training, being trained by actors to be able to feel more comfortable doing presentations. There's all kinds of external training to support this as well.
It's a great response. We're getting tight on time here, and there are a lot of phenomenal questions that are coming through. I think that some of them are going to be answered really well by our upcoming panel and our next speaker as well. And I'll try to follow up with a few people after the webinar, if possible. So the closing question that I'll give you is, if you had to say one thing, what's the best piece of advice you'd like to give a young person about getting their career started?
So I think I would say just jump in. When I took my first job as a local engineer in a utility that I really didn't know that much about utilities, I had no idea where my career would go. And so there are a lot of situations where how the job is described is not actually the experience of the role that you can get. So just jump in, take the opportunity, decide for yourself what you're going to get from it, and go from there.
That's great advice. Thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing your story with us on behalf of both Electricity Human Resources Canada and our many participants today. We are very, very grateful. Thank you, Michelle.
Thanks very much.
With that, I'd like to introduce the members of our Young Professionals panel, if they would kindly throw their cameras on and I can give everyone an introduction. They're joining us from different fields and backgrounds and from all different parts of Canada. So in alphabetical order, I'm going to introduce our guests, which include Leah Michalopoulos, who is the Director of Government Relations at the Canadian Electricity Association, Katie Schmitz, a product owner at ATCO Group, Mackenzie Gillen, a powerline technician apprentice at Hydro One, Matthew Maringer, a technical engineer at Ontario Power Generation and the Canadian Operating Officer at North American Young Generation and Nuclear, Molly Beckel, the marketing representative for Eastern Markets at TC Energy and president of the Young Pipeliners Association of Canada. I encourage you to share any questions that you have for the panel in the Q&A box on Zoom, and we'll do our best to answer them as much as we can. To get started, I have a few opening questions here for the panel. First, again, thank you for joining us. I'd like to get started with some of the details of each of you, and we can go through alphabetical order again. Could you tell us a little bit about your current job and the organization that you work for, starting with Leah?
Sure. Thanks, Alex. I'm really excited to be here today and talk about great careers in electricity. So my name is Leah Michalopoulos. I am the Director of Government Relations at the Canadian Electricity Association, so the association that represents many of Canada's electricity companies. And I focus mostly right now on our sort of US affairs and grid security file.
Thank you. Katie, would you like to go next?
Hi there. I work as a product owner at ATCO Group, which is a job that is really difficult to explain to my grandparents and most people who don't know what a product owner is. But essentially, I work on agile projects in the digital group, kind of as a shared service to the rest of ATCO.
Perfect. Mackenzie, would you like to go next?
So I'm about to start my apprenticeship with as a powerline technician with Hydro One and Power Workers Union. So basically, a powerline technician, we build and maintain transmission and distribution lines. And basically, we ensure that electricity travels safely from a generation station to a customer's house.
Sounds good. And Matthew, you're up next.
So I'm Matthew Maringer. I work as a technical engineer at the Darlington Nuclear Power Plant at Ontario Power Generation. And right now I'm an environmental qualifications single point of contact, a mouthful, I know. Really what we look at is age sensitive materials, so O-rings, gaskets, those type of soft elastomers. And we looked at the safety analysis. So if we had an accident, could it survive the chemical conditions, the radiation, the heat? So where we saw this go wrong was in the Challenger type of shuttle. That was an O-ring that caused that failure. So we do similar things in the nuclear industry.
Okay, and last but not least, Molly.
So for what I consider my real job, I'm the president and CEO of YPAC, which is the Young Pipeliners Association of Canada, although I don't get paid for that job. But for my day job, I work at TC Energy in our Eastern Markets group, which is based out of Toronto. And I'm a marketing representative there, which means I manage customer accounts and the sales and marketing role.
Great. Thank you everyone for joining us. I know everyone here has a really diverse sort of background and sort of education stream, some of which do really directly relate and some of which are maybe a little bit more out of the box in their creativity. So I'd like to hear sort of about what you went to school for and the career path that you took to your current job. And if we want, we can go through alphabetical order again to make it easy.
Gosh, you're putting me on the spot, Alex. Okay, so I have a bachelor's degree in international relations and environmental ethics from the University of Toronto. And I'm also doing right now a master's degree in communications, all online at Johns Hopkins University out of the United States, which is really fun. So my career path, very in kind of a random one to get to where I am today. I started out actually, sort of my first real job was in politics. I started volunteering for a member of provincial parliament at the Ontario legislature. Sort of fell in love with the political world. And then after I graduated, I went to work at a federal minister's office, so the Minister for the Environment. And then when things sort of switched up on the hill, I was looking for work again and sort of found this job at the Canadian Electricity Association. Sort of my initial job there was just to assist with a big event we put on in Washington, D.C. every year for our CEOs to talk about how great the electricity relationship is with the United States. And then I never left. I ended up loving the job so much and just have been able to, sort of move up in different positions at CEA. And here I am today.
That's awesome. Katie, you want to jump in?
Yeah, so I guess it's similar to Leah. I have an English degree, a Bachelor of English Literature, so nothing to do with electricity. And so when I graduated, I loved my degree so much. I enjoyed it so much, but then when I was done, I kind of freaked out because I thought I had no applicable or like hard skills to actually apply in the workforce. So I was actually working as a lifeguard at the time, and I started serving at what is called Blue Flame Kitchen at ATCO. So it was like a community outreach kind of arm for ATCO. It was a way to get the public involved in learning more about natural gas and electricity and to teach people how to cook. So I was serving there, and then I started working full time at the front desk. So I was working with customers, and then Blue Flame Kitchen was acquired by what is now called ATCO Energy, which is a retail energy business under ATCO's many kind of companies. And so all of a sudden we were responsible for selling energy to customers as well. So one of the most important things about that customer facing job for me was learning how confusing the energy industry is for most people, and how hard it is to explain it, especially when someone's already mad about their energy bill. So that was a really valuable experience. And then I was working on our class registration system at the time, and there was an opportunity to be on a project to replace it. So I basically just desperately put my hand up and said, I really want to be on that project. And that kind of started my career in working in digital projects. And then the amazing thing about working for ATCO is that I've been able to do some additional schooling that supported my kind of growth there. So I was able to take some courses in business management. I am currently working on my business analysis certificate as well, which is a really amazing way to learn about business and also be almost indispensable in a company. You learn how to document, you learn how to ask questions. And then I got certified as a product owner as well, which is what I do now. And I work in a self-organized team, which is really amazing. There's no kind of hierarchical structure. I work in a self-organized team, and basically I provide the priorities for the team, and we all work together to get our projects done. So I feel like I've been able to apply a lot of my English analytical skills, but yeah, it's a really, really fun career.
It's so interesting here. I think we all have personally and professionally related to people not quite understanding engineering and energy and the sorts of things that we do. I already love to hear the fact that you both have very unconventional entries into your careers. You also have employers that not only have given you opportunities to move up, but that are supporting your continuing education and flexibility, which is just amazing. Very hard to find, but one of the reasons that, of course, we're big believers in being able to work in this sector. So, Mackenzie, you want to jump in next?
Yes. So when I went to college, I took a 2-year college program that specialized for power line technicians at Conestoga College. This program allowed me to practice the fundamental skills of my trade in a controlled environment, and also gave me in-the-field exposure during my co-op terms. Now, the next stage to becoming a power line technician is to complete my apprenticeship. So for anyone that is unfamiliar with the Canadian apprenticeship system, there's regulated standards that an apprentice must meet to be eligible to write for their national recognized journeyman status, or better known as a red seal. For example, my power line technician apprenticeship with Hydro One will consist of 4 2,000-hour terms, and in between each term, I will go to a training center where I will complete theoretical and practical assessments to ensure that I'm on par with the standards. Now, upon completion of my journeyman or the apprenticeship, I will be considered a journeyman within Ontario. Now, to get a national level of recognition, I am now eligible to write my Red Seal exam, which will allow me to work across the country and be recognized as a journeyman. So an apprenticeship is kind of like your traditional mainstream classroom, except instead of my classroom being like a lecture hall, my classroom will be on our job site. Instead of paying tuition, we get paid to go to school. And typically when you finish your apprenticeship, the company that invested in your apprenticeship and sent a lot of resources on you, typically they want to keep you on as a journeyman. So usually you have a job when you finish.
It's exciting. And that's a really great crash course for anyone who is unfamiliar with how the trades work, especially in Canada, because I think it's often overlooked, the tremendous amount of opportunities, how much quickly you can get a career started, how, you know, you're being paid to do this kind of work as you learn. It's really, really phenomenal. Matt, do you want to tell us about your career path?
Sure. So I went to university for my Bachelor of Engineering in Nuclear Engineering from Ontario Tech University. I did an internship at Ontario Power Generation for just over a year, so that was a great experience after doing 3 years of schooling to see what the real world was like, and it was great that that was paid as well. And then when I graduated, I started full-time at Ontario Power Generation. I've worked at both nuclear stations at Pickering and Darlington, variety of roles. So I've worked in project controls as a cost and schedule analyst, so I was in the business world. I was a modification team leader for minor modifications. I was a reactor safety analyst for a while. I was in performance engineering. I did 2 years in a rotation in stakeholder relations, so dealing with international type of evaluations through the United Nations. And yeah, and really what I started to do was found my passion later in the company was dealing more with stakeholders and advocacy. So similar to the others, I'm pursuing my master's in public policy next year. I'm doing my graduate diploma in nuclear technology at Ontario Tech University, and really was getting involved in the nonprofits. That was really where I found my passion. So North American Young Generation Nuclear, the Canadian electricity sector has a lot of these opportunities to give back. So really, it was once you get your foot in the door, you can find what you like. There's lots of opportunities within the company. You can do rotations, you can find different types of positions, but yeah, just been a journey and it continues onward.
Thank you for finding the time in your very busy schedule to join us today, Matt, because I know you're juggling a lot. So thank you for that. Molly, you want to tell us about your career path?
Yeah, for sure. So I went to the University of Waterloo. I graduated with a degree in management engineering back in 2013. So that tells you how old I am, if you wanted to know. As part of that program, I did a co-op, so that's mandatory at Waterloo. So that's 6 4-month placements. And those spanned all across the country. So I worked at the Securities Commission. I worked out in the field in Provost, fixing oil wells when I was 18, driving a truck, and not well, just so you know, I did not drive the truck particularly well. And I also worked in software as a manufacturing software developer. And then I did my last work term at Apple, and I worked in China and California. And so I chose not to stay there. I didn't really fit in well with the corporate culture. It's very cutthroat and competitive. And I also didn't want to dedicate my life to making things more black, because that was my job, to make an internal component that no one saw more black. So I decided I wanted to go back to the energy industry. I really enjoyed that part of my co-op. And so I moved back home to Alberta. And that's also because I couldn't find a job in Ontario, because that was a tough time in our economy. And I landed a job at TC Energy. So my first job there was working in our Mexico projects group. So I was a field engineer in Naranjos and Tamazunchale, building pipelines through the jungle, and working on facilities. And then I moved into our facilities integrity team, and I got to travel all across Canada fixing turbo compressor subsystems. So I became our lube oil person, our air compressor person. And then I moved into this role in commercial, so working with customers. And while I was in my previous role in facilities, I joined the Young Pipeliners Association of Canada as our Calgary chair. And that role really gave me the ability to learn how to do the things I'm doing now. So marketing, pitch development, public speaking, that I learned all of that through my volunteer work. And now I'm the president of our association.
That's really great. That's awesome. I think everyone has a pretty great sense of all the different sorts of career paths and entries and different bases that we're sort of covering today. We can open it up into some or other broad questions that don't have to go in alphabetical order. So to start, one of the things I'd like to ask is, there's so many different things going on in energy. Like we heard Michelle George just talking about all the different sort of future facing things. We all have the own projects that we're working on at our companies that are so future facing. I'm curious, as young people, which are the things that you think are the most interesting and the parts that you get the most passionate about? Feel free to jump in.
I'll go first. I know that Michelle had mentioned digitization, which is something that I'm passionate about because you may hear companies talking about it now. I think a lot of people call it digital transformation. And so I've been able to be a part of that at ATCO. We actually didn't have a digital team 2 years ago at all. And so we had IT, and then we had our companies, and they had to kind of talk to IT about how do we get a project done. So the cool thing about having a digital operation at your company is that you have that facilitating engine. So all of the ideas that the business comes up with, you don't have to go to IT and say, can we buy this product, and we're going to have some people off the side of their desks work on this project. It's a dedicated team that can take all of those ideas, take the platform or whatever kind of engine that you choose, and they can facilitate that. And the other item that Michelle mentioned as well was the changeover to more of an agile way of working, or using the agile methodology in your projects, which is really interesting to me because I personally work so much better in an agile environment. In the kind of more traditional way of doing it, which is a waterfall method, you kind of gather everything at the start, and you work really hard, and then by the time you're done the project, it doesn't match what the original requirements were. So the really cool thing about agile and part of digital transformation is that you release really often. So in my business, we release every 2 weeks, which means that after those 2 weeks, if the requirements change, we can change it, adapt, and make something that is so much more effective for our business. So
Really, really dynamic. And I think one of the interesting things that you talk about with digitization is that it goes hand in glove with the whole trend towards electrification in Canada right now, where we're moving towards things, whether it's electric vehicles, smart grids, Internet of Things devices. But the combination of the building the digital competencies with the electrification of our whole society is really, really neat. Leah, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, sure. I'll just jump on the digitization and electrification piece and say, as everything becomes more digitized, as more of our economy becomes electrified, I think the security aspect, the cybersecurity aspect is going to become even more important and exciting going forward. And there is so much work being done right now by electricity company employees, also working with government partners to ensure sort of our grid and supply chain stays safe. And it's really interesting because I have to say, I never really thought about electricity security before I started working in this job. I mean, just in Canada and the United States, we're really blessed with a really secure and reliable grid. And I just kind of thought, well, this just happens, nothing to think about here. And then when I started working in the sector, you just realize how many people are working really hard all the time, to keep the grid reliable and secure. And just how many jobs there are out there to do that right now. So I think it's a really exciting place, especially for young people looking to maybe start a career and are interested in puzzle solving or computers. There are a lot of opportunities there to take hold of.
Yeah. I mean, if you're a cybersecurity engineer and you're debating between a job at Facebook where you make the login process slightly stronger, or working with the utility to protect it from potentially malicious foreign cyber attacks and keep everyone's power running in Canada, it's a much more interesting and dynamic sort of environment for career line. Our other panelists, what else is getting you really excited about electricity right now?
Well, I can tell you in our line of business, hey, I'm coming from the pipeline line of business, but what makes us excited from an electricity perspective is that there is growing demand for electricity, especially as electrification comes in. And that's true in terms of the world needing more energy. And at the same time, the world needs to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And so when we, really look strategically in the pipeline space, and especially for the young pipeliner perspective, the idea of a net zero world being enabled by pipeline technology is really what we're kind of looking at right now, because pipelines are the way that you're linking supply and markets, and that includes electricity because it includes gas-fired generation. But it also links your carbon capture technology that enables those kind of net zero technologies. You're linking hydrogen, which is also something that was mentioned before in terms of looking at grid stability. We're looking at waste heat technologies. So I think that's the main exciting area that we're focused on right now, especially from a young pipeliner's perspective, is how do pipelines enable that net zero future that young people really care about?
Mackenzie, were you going to jump in there?
Yes. One thing that's really interesting me right now in Ontario's grid is we're looking at going from your traditional grid to a bidirectional grid. Now, the traditional grid goes from the generation station, transmission lines, substation, distribution, step down to your secondary voltage and into the consumer's meter. Typically, you don't want the electricity coming back. As a worker on the line, that's called backfeed, and that can be a huge hazard to workers. Now, as we start producing our net meters, this allows consumers to produce their own electricity. Say you have solar panels on your roof, you can now supply electricity to your own house, but you can also sell this back into the grid as kind of like it's all monitored through the net meter, so it can calculate electricity flow going in and going back out. So I'm kind of curious as to how this is going to help with renewable energy. You're going to see a few microgrids, maybe some little pockets in some areas. You can use an electric vehicle now to buy electricity on cheaper rates, and then now power your own house, and then and then you just recharge it at nighttime when it's a little bit cheaper. I'm also curious as to a worker standpoint, what sort of protocols are going to change in my own trade and my occupation to ensure that our safety is going to be kept, while the grid is now going to be encouraged to come back out the other way.
That's such an interesting frontier to think about how everyone in Canada can sort of go from just consumers of electricity to also producers, and how that's being sold and how that has an impact on, making our grid even greener. It's such an interesting future that we have ahead of us for that. I've got a few questions coming up. I have one directed really specifically at Matt, but I'm going to genericize it. And Matt, I'm going to have you be the first one to answer this. So for those of you here who did co-op placements or other forms of work integrated learning like internships, how do you find that helped you prepare yourself for your career or even get your foot in the door with your first jobs?
Yeah, so I'll just quickly add on to what others were saying for the excitement, because I think nuclear is there as well. So for nuclear, we have $20+ billion refurbishments going on in Ontario right now. So Darlington and Bruce Power. So lots of work, lots of skilled trades, lots of opportunities coming up. As well, we saw the premiers from Ontario, New Brunswick, Saskatchewan, and Alberta sign on for the small modular reactors. So these are nuclear reactors that are smaller, that can go in Indigenous communities, they can go in isolated communities, they can go in mining communities. So it's opening up nuclear to these whole other sectors, developing nations that we haven't seen before. We're harvesting medical isotopes from our nuclear reactors as well. So just lots of potential, and nuclear fusion is making breakthroughs on the West Coast. There's General Fusion. There's the ITER project in Europe right now. So lots of new nuclear going on. 50 new reactors around the world are under construction. We're looking at small modular reactors that can't melt down, that are good for 10 years. So just lots of amazing stuff. But for internship, I thought that was a great opportunity. It gives you a break from school, because I think if you're stuck in the academic world for too long, you don't see how the world really operates. You don't get those different skills. And it also lets you see which type of companies are out there, how you fit in with their company structure, with their environment, and you learn about the different sections and roles that are maybe a better fit for you. So you could go into something as a co-op or an intern. You could say, okay, maybe my next one, I'll try something different. And for the employer, they get to see, are you dependable? Do you have the skills? Are you the right fit for their company? So I thought it was a great opportunity. And I think that's probably one of the best decisions I've made was to do an internship.
Someone else with co-op experience want to jump in and share theirs?
I would totally reiterate what Matt said, but I think the single greatest skill I learned on co-op was how to use email properly. Like, I know this is something that people laugh at, but if you don't know how to use Outlook, it's a huge learning curve. And so I remember my very first job at the Securities Commission, I learned how to use Outlook. I learned how to use Excel. I learned how to sit in meetings and take notes. And these are things that you don't know. Maybe Gen Z is listening to this, thinks I'm some kind of old dinosaur millennial because like I didn't know how to use Outlook, but I didn't. And so I think there are certain skills that you cannot learn in university that are definitely learned in co-op programs. And I think the idea of testing out what you like, finding out what you hate, those are the really key things that help you make decisions later as well. And so that's what co-op helped me for.
All very good points. I know some adults well on their careers that could probably use a refresher in how to use Outlook too, so don't feel bad about that at all. As sort of a different question directed specifically at Mackenzie, but a similar thing, we have a question that asks about what your experience has been like completing sort of like your pre-apprenticeship education and starting the apprenticeship process at Hydro One. For those that aren't as familiar with the trades, what does it look like when you're trying to start an apprenticeship versus applying for a different job?
Okay, so for me, I came from a very green background. I didn't really work on tools. I never really expected to be getting into a trade. So I took a 2-year pre-powerline course at Conestoga. Sometimes, depending on your employer, your your years at college can be put towards your apprenticeship. In my situation, it won't be. But coming from a very green or very blank slate in the trades, for co-op terms, it's very competitive to get them. So what I noticed was a lot of my classmates were beating me out for co-op terms because they might have grown up on tools, had a little bit more experience than I did. So what I started doing was I started researching what companies want from an apprentice and what they want from journeymen. So for example, CPR and first aid is a great ticket to have, chainsaw experience, all this sort of stuff. And then I took a co-op term that I was the only one in my class to go out of province for my co-op term. I went out to Nova Scotia and New Brunswick where I painted transmission towers for the entire summer. So I would be up to 200 feet in the air and I was constantly on the road. So this now, I kind of took my experience not knowing a whole lot to doing something completely different from everyone else. So the application process, what I wanted to do was find as many ways to make myself stand out for my classmates as possible to be able to apply. Now the apprenticeship can be competitive. I think when in my year over 5,000 people applied, that's what I was told, and they took about 80. So what happens is that you apply online for my situation, I applied online. I had to do a questionnaire kind of profile, send in my resume, my documents, my references. And then I heard back about a month later that I had been selected for an interview. 230 something people had been brought down to this level. So we all went in for our interviews. Might be a little bit different with COVID right now. And our interview process. And then about a month later, I got a call saying that I was selected. COVID delayed the start date. Also, I was still in college at this point. So also for the apprenticeship, apply while you're in college as well. That's one thing that I'll recommend, but kind of the interview process, it might take a little bit longer depending on what utility you're trying to get in or what trade you're trying to get in, but just stay with it, be consistent, and try to separate yourself as much as possible from everyone else.
That's great. You're clearly much better with heights than I am, and I applaud you for that. I've got a question coming up for Katie and Leah. We have a question asking about someone else who has sort of a social sciences background, and that, when they looked at something like utility as an employer, things like that, the electricity sector, they never really saw those opportunities. But for yourselves that have, transitioned into this, what advice do you have for people that don't have like that sort of STEM background who are looking at potentially a career in this sector?
I think that's a great question. I think sort of if you don't have that background in electricity itself, there are so many, you don't understand it, right? And there are so many other people like that who make big policy decisions that relate to energy and electricity, who also don't understand energy and electricity. So I think one of the coolest jobs, I think, for many people in that social science background, there are so many opportunities to sort of become that translator. How do you translate sort of, the very technical things like Mackenzie and Molly are talking about here to ways that sort of, your average person or a policymaker can understand. And that's really important because, if people who are making decisions don't understand how things actually work, like, oh, we can't just do all of X tomorrow, like, oh, that's going to hurt reliability. You could end up with some unintended consequences. And I think the second thing for me, when I got into this industry, is that realizing there's a lot of people who are a lot smarter than you and who are always really happy and really passionate to talk about their jobs. So ask questions, try to learn things, sit into meetings that, you probably wouldn't think you're interested in, and just take every opportunity you can to learn.
Yeah, I would really echo that. I think it's really important to, like Leah said, go to meetings, just ask if you can just listen in or offer to take notes. That's kind of what I did as well. And I just learned so much from people who were really passionate about all of the hard skills that they had developed and all the knowledge that they have. And so if you are more of a, an arts or social sciences, there's so many opportunities to use your soft skills in a corporate environment, because as Leah mentioned, there's so much translation needed, especially for, like, I think Matt mentioned that he has done a lot of work with stakeholders. That's a huge part of working in the electricity sector, is translating that technical language into something that your managers or customers can understand. And so I think working in digital is one place where I really do a lot of that translating, where, it comes from the customer. They don't understand how to sign up for energy. They don't understand their bill. So we take those those pieces of confusion, talk to the people who know about it, and say, how do we translate this for the customer in a way that makes sense? How do we visualize it? How do we make the process better so that they can sign up in a non-confusing way and they understand their energy processes?
That's great. I have another question that I think can apply to at least Leah and Matt, maybe Molly as well, with YPAC. But there's a question, and again, it's for Matt. I'm going to genericize it a bit, asking about sort of public policy and what it's like working on that and informing that kind of work, whether it's specifically nuclear at OPG, or Leah, the kinds of work that you're doing, for example, with the CEA, where you're guiding sort of a national discussion on it.
So for my day job, I wasn't working on policy specifically. We were looking at nuclear type of evaluations. So the World Association of Nuclear Operators. So it's people already in the nuclear industry that are doing technical type of evaluations and assessments just to make sure that we're complying. But in my nonprofit through North American Young Generation Nuclear and the Canadian Energy Association, all these others, Canadian Nuclear Association, we work with the government, and it's really about trying to be a translator, like you said. A lot of this public policy has downstream implications that they don't see. So C69, C68, the Fisheries Act, when they originally draft these up, they don't see how it impacts other industries. And as someone that is in industry, you can see how that will impact future projects or current projects. So really, it's just taking the time to sit down with legislators, to sit down with politicians, and to let them know from the ground perspective in your industry how it's going to impact, what the impacts are going to be, and how it's going to impact them, because they care about voters. So if it's impacting the economy, if it's impacting the local area where their voters are, they absolutely want to hear it. They want you as a technical expert to translate what that policy is going to mean in the real world. So that's been a lot of a learning experience, and it's simplifying the message, and it's putting it down to how it's going to impact them. So, you can have all the technical knowledge you want, but if you can't describe it or you can't see those links, then you're no real use for that type of role. So you need to be a translator there.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Matt, and I'll just sort of add on to that. I think when it comes to public policy, and as I said, sort of my focus has been, dealing with a lot of stakeholders in the United States. It's really about finding the common challenges and how we can find solutions together. It's about being solutions oriented and coming with folks and saying, hey, look, you want to figure out how to have more reliable electricity. Well, how can we work together to find a solution? Oh, so you're also working on things like SMRs. Well, so are we. Are there opportunities for us to collaborate and get more smart people in the room together doing smart things? So I think when it comes to dealing with any stakeholder public policy maker, it really is trying to sort of position sort of electricity or energy or the work that you're doing in a way that shows people how can help them and how it can make a life better for everybody. And I feel like that's one of my biggest jobs. And I think the second thing is just being a storyteller. If you tell a story about how electricity makes life better for people, or how energy, any type of energy makes life better for people, and then people really grasp onto that and make connections with those personal stories.
And I'll just add, in terms of our work with Young Pipeliners Association of Canada, we don't do a lot of government engagement work, but we have in the past. I think a lot of our focus is more on the attraction and retention of young people to the industry. And part of that is influencing the young people themselves in terms of providing them a vision of the future that they can believe in. I think part of what's challenging with pipelines, oil and gas, and even electricity or energy is the idea of, is this an industry where the future aligns with what my values are as a young person? And so a big part of what YPAC strives to do is to produce and really articulate the vision of the future for this industry that really responds to the questions that young people ask of the energy industry. So is it responding to climate change? Are you reconciling with Indigenous peoples? Is this a diverse, equitable, and inclusive place to work? And are you being innovative, or are you stagnant? And we think that if we're able to ask the industry and government to do that, then we'll have a more successful industry in the future.
Some excellent responses. We have another good question that's come in through the chat that is a question that we at EHRC are asking a lot of the members from our sector right now, which is, how has the COVID-19 pandemic sort of affected your workplaces, the kinds of work that you're doing right now? Mackenzie, I know you have an answer for this one for sure, but I'd love to hear about sort of how much that's affected you, or I know for most of the sector, it's been largely stable. So I'd love to hear from each of you about that.
So for me, I was supposed to start my apprenticeship back in May. Due to COVID-19, we don't have the luxury in our trade to work remotely. We need to kind of be there on the job site. So same thing with training. There's a lot of practical stuff that we need to learn. So for safety measures, we were postponed for our start date. I start Monday for my apprenticeship. Now, when I was supposed to start my apprenticeship, I was supposed to kind of drop out of college to go start my apprenticeship. I found this as an opportunity to finish off my college diploma, go learn practical skills, and I can do the rest of the theoretical stuff online. And also I was able to pick up, a big thing about the trades is that there are tons of transferable skills. So I wasn't quite, one thing that I mentioned before is a experience that, or ticket and training that employers want in the trade is chainsaw ticket. So I had done my chainsaw training in my first year of college, but I didn't really have a whole lot of experience. So I was out of work for a little bit. I was able to pick up work with an arborist in town, get more experience within the field. There are tons of transferable skills, so it might not be necessarily related to Powerline, but there are tons of skills that I can learn from every single job site that I can apply to my job and to my future career.
Awesome. Would anyone else like to jump in?
Sure. So for Ontario Power Generation, they started up the Crisis Management Communications Center, the Infectious Disease Issue Response Team, and at the site levels, we had the COVID command centers. So again, this is where these different types of roles sometimes come up. So I was actually leading the COVID command center And it's still ongoing right now. So we originally sent everyone that wasn't essential to producing electricity to work from home at the start of this. We've started to roll back at different sites to 50% or 75% or 100% back to office. But as electricity producers, we impact the hospitals, we impact the grocery stores, water supply, and that is an essential service. So that's why I was so happy when the COVID crisis hit. Everyone's worried about toilet paper. No one was worried about their heat in their home or their cooling or the hospitals or the ventilators. So that's why I was really happy to be part of, OPG, the electricity producer. And like I said, we've had no workplace transmission on work. We have a lot more plexiglass here. We have mask policy on site. Some people are working from home, but most of us are back in the office or back, or some of them never even left. They're still in the nuclear reactors or the hydro stations producing power, so we didn't have to worry about it. So.
I think just from the Canadian Electricity Association perspective, one of the really interesting things about this job is that we have members who are different electricity companies from across Canada. So we're able to really see how sort of the sector overall responded. And I have to say it was sort of extremely impressive. I feel like one really cool thing about the electricity energy sector is that it does have a tradition of sort of stepping up to ensure essential services sort of in times of emergency or in times of need, and working together to overcome challenges. And, this was also very true during COVID. I think one thing we've talked about a lot at CEA is like that we've been very proud, but not at all surprised by sort of the levels of sort of creativity and cooperation shown by the sector during the pandemic. And especially for me from CEA was just seeing the cooperation aspect between utilities. I know folks were so busy dealing with the pandemic response directly in their company, but they sort of never hesitated to sort of answer questions from other utilities saying, hey, you're trying out this thing with COVID. Can you let me know how it worked? They would never hesitate to answer those questions and pick up the phone, which is really cool, and sort of engage in sort of collective problem solving, which was great. And there's also a lot of cooperation as well, even across the border. I think electricity companies from across North America actually work together on solving pandemic challenges. And there's a lot of cooperation sort of with government and regulatory partners as well. It really was and still is all hands on deck, effort. And it was just really cool to see that. And it just makes you feel really good about working in this sector.
That's great. Katie, I know that you work on like a completely digital team. So what's the impact been like for you?
Yeah, our team was, we do have the luxury of working from home, which is so nice. Our entire digital team is working from home just to make sure that the people who do need to work at the office can. So I believe that at my company, we're at about a 50% capacity in Calgary right now, but we're also a global company. So it's been really interesting listening to people in my company from other places. There's some people that work for our electricity sector in Puerto Rico right now. There's people in South America, Mexico. So it's been interesting to hear from them as well. It's been, I think, much more challenging for them working out on the front lines. But for digital, it's been really incredible to work with our team. Our team is really diverse. And as I mentioned, we're self-organized. So our team has just had almost no hiccups working from home. It's been really incredible to see what people are able to achieve. But we also, less in an emergency capacity, but we noticed that people, especially during the kind of lockdown in Calgary, people were really focused on their homes. They started to look at their energy bills more in a more detailed way. They started thinking about, maybe we want to have solar power, solar panels in our home. Maybe we want to install an electric vehicle charger. So we were actually able to pivot to start offering those services to the public as well. And a lot of that was building the platforms to be able to offer those services and also facilitate them. So keeping track of our service providers, being able to provide quotes to customers. So I worked on those projects during the summertime.
That's great. Molly, did you have anything that you wanted to add about your experience?
Well, I would say if you're starting a new job in this environment and you're starting all virtual, it'll be hard. So definitely my partner who's working downstairs in the basement, well, not the basement, our main floor, he can probably hear me, but he just started a job virtually, and it's not easy because you don't get to meet people in person. And so, you know, if you are an intern kind of facing that reality, certainly make sure that you reach out, stay connected to your peers, you know, volunteer, try to find ways outside of just the virtual meeting room to be getting to know your team better. And yeah, that would be my piece of advice in this environment if you are starting all virtual.
Good point. And I know that we've hired some people under the pandemic at EHRC, and we've made special efforts to make sure that they feel that they get FaceTime with the team when it's appropriate and safe as well too. But it's a bit tricky if you're starting your career right now as well too. So I've got another question for the whole panel as well. I'd like to hear about how your career in electricity has been in terms of fulfilling some of your expectations. I know for myself, I have a background as sort of a business marketer. I've worked in tech startups. I've worked in a lot of different charities, and I really wish that I knew about working in electricity sooner, because I found it's just to be like such a stable, collaborative, cooperative sector to be working in. What's your experience been like in terms of, you know, going through school and graduating and having this job?
I can start. So I think, as I mentioned before, working in, you know, an electricity field was not something I ever thought about. But then I think once I started working in this field, it's something that you just really want to be a part of, because you really do realize how essential energy and electricity is for everything that our lives depend on. And, you know, you want to be part of that. And I think, as I mentioned before, sort of on the public relations side, you have that opportunity to tell people that really cool story about electricity, whether it be the technology side or the security side or the diversity side, and that's exciting. And I think also, like, working in the energy and electricity field, it does kind of feel like it's public service in a way. You know, you go to work feeling like, you know what, I think I am maybe helping, you know, Canadians a little bit every day, which is wonderful. And then finally, I think just sort of like the community, like I'm going to say like the electricity community. Sort of, as I mentioned before, everybody is always so helpful and so passionate to talk about their work and so solutions oriented and want to solve problems. I think the last panelist, she talked about sometimes, you know, being the only woman in a room. You know, I've been in many conferences where I think I might be the only person under 50 in the room, but I've never felt like I have not been welcome, or that my ideas didn't matter, or that they didn't want to take time to answer my questions, because I did have a lot. So, you know, it's been, I think, just a really good community to work in.
Yeah, I'll just add on to that. So Ontario Power Generation, there's over 10,000 people. There's hydroelectric projects, there's solar projects, there's gas projects, there's nuclear as well. They're in the SMR field, they're in the isotope field. So when I thought of the electricity sector as an engineer, you know, I thought very narrowly, you know, just engineer, blueprints, designing that. But then when I got here, there's communications officers, there's government affairs officers, there's security officers. There's all these different roles in electricity that we need, and we need people to apply from the arts programs, the pipe fitters, we need the trades in there. You know, we are essential service, and we need everyone to come together and see the opportunities out there. In nuclear, I've been super happy. You know, climate change is a big topic, isotopes are a big topic. I feel like I'm making a big difference in the world, especially after COVID, how essential electricity is. You know, we're fighting energy poverty. We're solving the problems of the world through this. So I've been really proud of that. And just the connectivity as well in nuclear. You know, we're always talking to our international partners. It's such a global type of connectivity there. So through the World Association of Nuclear Operators, the IAEA, there's all these different opportunities to go all around. So really happy, and it was a pleasant surprise. And it doesn't hurt that it's unionized as well. So I feel good for job security as well.
Yeah, I'll go next here. Yeah, I mean, I really echo Leah and Matt's is that it's been really stable for me. I've been able to be at the same company for over 7 years now, which in Alberta, which I feel really fortunate to have that experience. And it's been just like Matt said, I really didn't know all of the job opportunities that were in the electricity sector. I thought, because I have an arts background, I'm not an engineer. I don't have management experience. There's nothing for me, but there's so many jobs that are required, and you can really make your kind of own position too, because if you're working with stakeholders, if you're working with project teams, there's always an opportunity to be a leader, even if you don't have a management title. So I think that's really important, is to kind of show up as a leader every day, regardless of your position. And I think it presents a lot of opportunities for you while you're working.
For me, the electricity sector has been really fulfilling for my career expectations, even though I'm fairly new. It's allowed me the opportunity to travel, allowed me to finish school with very minimal student debt, which was a huge pro for me. And it's always going to be constant. If you ever want to test how much people need electricity, I challenge you to go unplug your household Wi-Fi box. You will become a household favorite. So for me, the way people need electricity and the demand for it, I don't see it going anywhere. And just even from this panel or tons of networking events, you meet a bunch of people that are in so many different career levels, and there are so many different ways to transfer from different levels. There are endless opportunities.
Yeah, I found it incredibly fulfilling to work in this industry. It can be a challenge, I think, especially to be a pipeliner. That's not an easy conversation to have. Moving from Alberta to Ontario has also taught me that. It's a different culture out here in terms of whether emotions are riled in those conversations. But what I find fulfilling is that those are critical conversations for our time. I really love that organizations like YPAC and even TC Energy are facing those challenges. And I think it's exciting to be part of building the future and also being essential. And so that's what I find fulfilling, in addition to the people. I love the people I work with.
Those are all phenomenal points. I'm going to give one final question to the panel before we wrap up for our time today. And it's just, as young people speaking to other young people on this panel, what is the best piece of advice you'd like to give for someone who is looking for their first job? Or what piece of advice maybe have you been given that's impacted you the most? Well, we can do it alphabetical to make it easy. We'll start with Leah. Sorry, Leah.
That's good. I think for me, it's just try things. Like, you don't have to wait for the perfect job or the perfect volunteer opportunity that exactly matches up with whatever you think your career might have to be. Like, there's so many different paths life can take you. And the more experience you have, you meet new people, you try new things, you figure out what you like, what you're good at, what you want to work on. And that's so important. So don't wait for the perfect opportunity. Just go out and seek things. And the second thing I think for people just starting their first job is just don't be afraid to ask questions. You're not the smartest person in the room, and people don't also expect you to know everything. So don't be afraid to ask if you don't know something. And that would be my advice. Thanks.
Yeah, I would agree with Leah. My first one was going to be question everything. It's so important to ask questions, because even what may seem like a dumb question to you might open up a whole new conversation with stakeholders or with a project team. And my second piece of advice is from Brené Brown, which is that exhaustion is not a status symbol. So burnout can have a very long-term effect on your life. So I definitely went that route. I was trying to prove myself without my hard skills and went through a severe period of burnout, and it's kind of lasting through your life. So if you can kind of keep that work-life balance right from the beginning, I think that's really important.
One thing my dad taught me from a young age was he would always tell me, work harder on the little things and the big things will happen. So when you start out a new job, new career, new anything, you're going to start out at the bottom. Like for me as an apprentice, odds are I'll be the guy on the shovel or I'll be the person on the ground getting material ready. That's the way it is. You work your way up no matter what the job is. So if you consistently do the small things well, take the not so glamorous tasks and make the most of it and ask questions, learn, and keep trying to improve, it'll pay off in the future.
For me, it was really looking at the company structure rather than the specific job. Is there growth there? Does their company profile fit with what I'm looking for? Is there opportunities to expand? Because once you get your foot in the door, you can transition to other roles, other locations. And then once you're in the career, start looking for stretch goals, stretch opportunities, whether it's volunteering for nonprofits or even taking on extra roles. So if you're not happy where you are, find out where you want to be and look at how you can get there through volunteering or doing extra work to show that you're dedicated and that you have the abilities to get there.
And I think to add on what Matt is saying, joining YPAC was what allowed me to pivot my career from something that was highly technical to something that's externally customer facing. So it gave me those skills. And doing nonprofit and volunteer work is an amazing way to do that. But you also have to make that work visible, because you can be working away doing the best job that you possibly can. And if nobody knows that you're doing it, it can feel like it's not worthwhile. And so there are ways to increase your visibility that is not bragging, but is sharing your accomplishments in a way that makes you highlighted and shows that you've dedicated yourself beyond the scope of your day-to-day. So being visible, I think, is a huge, important thing for people to focus on.
This is all excellent advice, and I am so grateful that all of you were able to join us today. You've provided a huge diversity of perspectives on all the different sorts of opportunities and things there are to love about careers in electricity. Thank you again very much for our enthusiastic group of young professionals joining us today. With that, I'd like to welcome our final guest for today, Nirav Patel. Nirav is the Director of Human Resources for Ontario Power Generation, one of the largest electricity generators in the country. Nirav is a graduate of the University of Waterloo with an Honours BA in Sociology Applied Studies with an HR minor, as well as York University with a Masters of Human Resources Management. Nirav has worked at OPG for over 11 years, starting in recruitment and now directing all areas of human resources for the company of over 10,000 employees. He is enthusiastically dedicated to supporting OPG's whole team and fostering a culture of positivity and accomplishment for the major utility. In addition, Nirav is the Vice Chair of EHRC's Board of Directors. I can say firsthand he is one of the most passionate and dynamic HR professionals that I've had the pleasure of working with. Nirav, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Alex. How are you?
Good. I can't see your video. I'm not sure if you're able to turn it on.
I will try. Can
Perfect.
you see me now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Hi, everybody.
And it's all yours. You're good to go, Nirav.
So I just wanted to address the group of youth that are on online today, and just impart you with a little bit of advice, and some of it you've already heard from the previous panel and from our speaker Michelle. But what I would say is, the sector is full of a lot of challenges. So when you think of climate change, if you can think of electrifying our economy, all of the challenges that we have with introducing innovation, we've got lots of legacy systems in the electricity sector that really need to be modernized. There's probably every occupation under the sun. You can even think of security, nursing, engineering, communications, government relations, regulatory affairs. You name an occupation and there's probably a spot for you in the electricity sector. And so it's a matter of really networking. And I'll share a quick story of a young person that emailed me. We work at Ontario Power Generation, one of the largest electricity companies in Ontario. We produce half of the electricity in the province. And this very young student sent me an email. I guess he saw me on LinkedIn or somehow got a hold of my email address. And he just stated that he wanted a little bit of advice because he's been applying to roles at OPG and he just was not able to get his foot in the door for a co-op job, and he's looking for a job in finance. And so I took the opportunity to arrange a 10-minute call with him, and he just asked some very smart questions. What's missing in my application? What are some things that you're looking for? And I think through that interaction, he was able to change his application around a little bit, and he actually got a co-op job at OPG. I heard from him months and months later when he emailed me from his OPG email, which was really nice. And so I think, you know, the moral of that story is network with people that are in the industry. Reach out to them through social media or LinkedIn. Many of the panelists have said everyone loves to talk about their careers. I think most people would be flattered that you reached out to them, and I'm sure most of these individuals would love to speak to you about how they got started, what some of the challenges are, and essentially what we're looking for from a skills perspective, because it is all about setting yourself apart. And some of that will have to do with how you choose to volunteer or what skills you're pursuing, or just some interesting things that you're doing that to add to your resume that are good career conversation starters, or help with your elevator pitch even when you meet some people in the sector. So I think identifying yourself as someone that's really interested and knowledgeable about the sector is really important. So do your research and then network as best you can. That's the advice that I have.
That's great. I think what we can do is if you don't have any other remarks that you'd like to share, we can jump into some questions here. And I encourage everyone in the audience to be able to share questions with Nirav. As the Director of Human Resources, he has a really strong understanding of what goes into the recruiting and the talent acquisition at a large utility. Really smart guy that can answer a lot of questions you may have about how you can get that interview and start towards that first job. So one of the questions that I'll start with Nirav is, you know, Ontario Power Generation is a sizable utility with a substantial workforce. Approximately, off the top of your head, how many different positions would you need to hire for in a given year across all of your sites? And what are some of the positions that you know are in the highest demand?
Sure. So good question. We have a fairly stable workforce right now, and one of the things that we're going through is unfortunately we're shutting down one of our sites, and with the nuclear industry, most power plants have a lifespan of about 30 years. And so while we're shutting down a site, there are still lots of jobs. So it takes about 20 years to decommission a nuclear site, and we'll start that in 2025. And at the same time, we are refurbishing our other asset, which is our Darlington facility. And so to basically update it to run for another 30 years, that's a $12 billion project. And with that comes lots of temporary contract and contingent work, project management work. So we have a combination of hiring the full-time regular, and we have a combination of hiring a lot of contract and contingent work. And for anyone trying to get in the sector, I wouldn't shy away from temporary work. Everybody loves to get a job that is full-time regular with benefits, but there is something to be said for bouncing around a little bit, taking on various contract jobs. I know at OPG, we've got about 1,000 contractors on site, from the trades to consultants to specialists that have very specific focus. And I think you'll be stronger early on in your career if you work for a number of organizations doing various things and really gathering that skill set up and upskilling yourself. You'll also network more and probably land yourself some really good jobs. So for us at OPG, it's about replacing some workers, but a lot of it is to hire a new type of worker, and a lot of that is contingent work.
That's very good points. One of the things that we've talked about it a few different times, and I think you probably have a really strong sense of this, is we've talked about developing professional skills and how to be successful in a job, you need more than just the hard skills or the technical skills, but that you also need these professional skills, whether you're in the field, an engineer, or working in the administrative side of things. What's your take on the value of these skills and how young people can go and develop them to secure the careers and advance in them?
Great question. And I've said this before in some forums. I sometimes have to terminate people in the line of work that I'm in, and most HR people have to do that from time to time. And I've actually been at OPG for about 20 years. And in those 20 years, I've never had to terminate someone because they lacked technical skills. So for all of the youth that are on this website and on this call, I would say get a great credential, whether it's being an engineer or a tradesperson, but that's really not the be all and end all. So soft skills are professional skills like integrating, collaborating, communicating, working across different levels. Can you share knowledge? Can you pivot to be flexible as the needs of the organization change? And so those are the skills that you probably need to focus on. And how to get some of those skills, a lot of it is just volunteering and agreeing to jump in to take something on. So we have lots of interns and co-op students in our organization, and we have engineers that are volunteering to run part of our charity campaign, for example. And what does that allow you to do? Well, it allows you to project plan. It allows you to send communications out to the company. It allows you to use our social media channels to get word out internally about various events. And I ran into someone and I said, what was the best part of this internship? And beyond all the technical skills that they learned about putting all of their knowledge that they learned in school to good use within the engineering function, they said they met a whole lot of people through volunteering on the charity campaign. And because of that, they were able to network, and they've got another job that's in another part of the business, nothing to do with engineering. And that's largely because they were able to meet different people. So getting out there and trying something different is probably the best way to develop professional skills, in my opinion.
Excellent points. We're getting a lot of really passionate questions about co-op placements, some very specific, but I think I'm going to open them up a bit and just say, for someone who is looking at doing that kind of work integrated learning, what should they be thinking of when they're applying for a co-op with OPG? And when they have a co-op position, what are the things that you think they should really focus on learning and developing as they do that?
Okay, so if you're looking for a job in a certain sector, the first thing is learn about the sector. So set yourself apart when you're writing your cover letter or your application, and keep in mind, I think one of the other panel members said they applied for a job and maybe 300 people were part of the applicant pool, and only about 30 or 40 get interviewed even. So that's the case for all kinds of internships. It's really competitive right now. And so learn about the sector. When you're putting a cover letter together, talk about the sector in that cover letter and why you're passionate about joining the company, and learn a little bit about the values. What's the most important value that the company has, and talk to that value and how that resonates with you. So for OPG, our biggest value is safety. Safety is foremost. It supersedes production. It supersedes pretty much everything. So for those people who in their applications may talk about safety, for example, they set themselves apart, because that's something that's really important to us. So think of ways that'll connect you to the organization, and I would really encourage you to do your research. And that could even be going on social media and asking if someone else worked in the company and what it was like, and just getting some basic knowledge and information.
Those are really good points. One of the things that you've sort of hinted at with some of like your community campaigns, and some of what I'm aware of is, OPG has been really responsive and not only supporting your employees during the pandemic, but also the communities that you operate in. And I've seen that you've donated funding and provided support to people in need. Can you tell me about the culture at OPG and how you work with your staff and with local communities to be more than just an employer?
Sure. So we have a real giving spirit at OPG, and one of the things that we really encourage is social license and stewardship. That's sort of what we call it. So our employees are an extension of our company and our values, and we operate in lots of communities. Some of them are remote across the province, and it is considered a privilege to operate in those communities, and that privilege can easily be taken away at any given time. So we don't do volunteering and all of these types of social support just because we want to do business in the community. We do it also because it's the right thing to do, but it speaks to the spirit. And when we did an evaluation of what we value as a collective in our company, a lot of it had to do with community building. And so that's really important to us. So one of the things that we do is encourage people to volunteer, to support causes. And as a company, we decide that we're going to support certain charities or events during the year. We have diversity committees that you can join, and they pick certain charities to support. And they also decide to do certain education events. So we've done things around Black Lives Matter to demystify certain things that are really affecting our society, frankly, and things that we really need to be educated on. So I think a lot of it has to do with education and our interest to always be lifelong learners at OPG, and our interest to have good hearts. And I go to a lot of retirement parties at OPG because we've got a company with a lot of long service employees, and every single speech that I hear is about the fact that the company has a heart. And I think that's there's something to be said for an organization that really aligns with your personal values. And if you're able to find a company that does align with these personal values and does the things that you want to do, and you're able to exhibit a lot of pride for working in the organization, I think that's gold. And those are the organizations that you should really be seeking out.
That's great advice. I have a question here that I'm gonna open up a little bit. We have someone that's asking about what the demand would be like for fields and things like data science and data engineering, but we've also talked a lot today about emerging technologies, new frontiers for electricity. What do you think about some of these emerging areas that you're thinking of hiring? What are some of the ones that you're anticipating are going to be in increased demand in the next few years?
So data management is probably one, and you can call it data management, AI, machine learning, whatever you want to call it. But it's this idea of using innovation to be more efficient and to save money. That's on the top minds of probably every CEO that's working in the electricity sector right now. And we're not great at it, to be honest. I mean, we have a lot of legacy systems. It's a sector that's been around for forever, from the days where electricity started in Niagara Falls, for example, in our province. So we have run on a lot of electricity, or on a lot of legacy systems that really need to be upgraded. And we also need to just leverage technology. So one thing at OPG that we're doing is I support our hydro business from an HR perspective, and we usually have trades workers that have to get in a truck and go kilometers up a river system to check on certain sluice gates and those kinds of things. Well, now we have drones to do that. And so the employee now isn't driving. What they're doing is looking at a computer screen and navigating a drone and going in the right spot to make sure that things are running safely and smoothly. So that's like an example of innovation that's being used. And what we're looking for is really creative people that have top-notch skills, that are also very questioning in their attitude and very curious. Those are two skills that I think you really need to have in the electricity industry. You need to be curious, ask really good questions, and you also need to be creative. And so everybody should be asking why. Why are we doing it this way? Could there be a better way of doing things? And if you have a good idea, I think you probably wouldn't be stopped from pursuing that. And that's one of the things that we're trying to drive at OPG, is to have a questioning attitude and come up with some great solutions. And I think that's an area where we're really trying to tap into a lot of young people to come into the sector and help us out. We've got a lot of challenges and we need a lot of help.
Some great opportunities for young people looking for a really interesting and innovative career. I want to go back to one of the things that you were talking about, which is that, one of OPG's first value is safety, which is something that I know is the highest priority across all employers in the sector and is especially important at OPG. Can you tell us a little bit about how you foster a culture of safety and how you ensure that all of the employees are making safety their priority?
Sure. So safety is kind of built into our culture, and it is for a lot of electricity companies. But one of the first things we do generally when we start our meetings is someone asks, are there any safety issues or lessons learned from a safety perspective? And that could be someone even making a comment of, it was really slippery today, and we really need to get out our buckets of salt so that you can actually yourself just salt a certain area that has a patch. Like, safety is everyone's accountability, and we all have to do these things. Or just coaching somebody. So part of it is just, we've got something called an I care culture. So I care about your safety is something that we really promote. So you often get coached. You might get stopped in the hallway to say, why are you walking and texting at the same time? And you're not supposed to get mad. You're just supposed to say thank you for the coaching, and you're supposed to pay it forward to someone else, because we all do those things. It's human nature to sometimes be in a rush and not pay attention. So for us, safety is involved in everything we do. What I'm most proud about of late is we've rolled out a lot of mental health related tools. So with the pandemic, running a 24/7 operation, some people have the luxury of working from home, but I would say out of our 9,000 employees, we've got about 6,000 employees that show up to a work site every day because they don't have the luxury of working from home. They have to keep the lights on in our province. And so there's a lot of strain on people doing shift work, having children at home. So we've launched a toolkit for all of our employees in terms of mental health resources that they can take advantage of, quick assessments that they can do. We've got an online tool for cognitive behavioral therapy. So if you're anxious about something, you would go onto this app, and it's very cool. It asks a series of questions, and there are live agents in the background that are trained to kind of help de-escalate and reduce some anxiety when you have it. So those are some of the things that we're working on. And every email that our leaders are starting to end with is, please look after yourself and the safety of others, because it's a team effort. So it's built into everything we do.
That's really great. Building on some of that, because you were talking about the ways that, you're stewarding the employees through the pandemic, and Matthew was speaking about this earlier about how electricity is an essential service, and people maybe didn't have that top of mind when COVID broke out. But what is it like to be part of an essential utility that's so important to so many people? How does that feel working in that kind of environment?
Well, I would say that there's a lot of pride in our sector on any given day, but I think during the pandemic, it's even more so. So beyond all of the donations that we've made to our local communities and things that we've done to help out, I think the fact that we have employees that are coming in every single day, working very safely, and we've had to do lots of things that are very different in our sector for social distancing or physical distancing, wearing masks, changing up our shift complements so that we're working safely. But we've been able to put megawatts on the grid without skipping a beat, more so than even the previous year. And that's really, some of it has to do with luck in terms of weather and river systems and water flows and all of those things. But a lot of it has to do with our ability to be very flexible and the reliability of our employees that are looking after their health and safety so that they can come to work every day and keep the lights on. So there's a lot of pride in our company right now, and we're grateful to all of our employees who have really persevered through this really tough time.
That's great, and I'm gonna tee up the last question that I've got for you today, because we're coming towards 2:00. So you've provided a lot of really great insight, both for starting your job, securing co-op, and things like that. As sort of a closing comment, what's the best advice that you would give to youth, sort of about their careers getting started, as someone who has such a wealth of human resources experience? Where do you think people should look for their first opportunities?
I would definitely say try and find some kind of internship, summer job. Those are coveted opportunities, and there's a lot of competition. So as I said before, figure out how you can set yourself apart, take on some volunteer activities, connect with an organization to see if you can help them out some way, even if it's unpaid. Those are the types of opportunities that will really set you apart from others. it'll certainly be a conversation starter for interviews or meetings that you might have, and network as best you can. If there's conferences, spend the money to go. If there's online forums like this, make yourself available. The best way to get a job is to build relationships. So it might even mean going onto LinkedIn and finding people that are working in the sector and reaching out to them. Sometimes they won't respond. Sometimes they may be too busy. But out of the 10 people or so that you might reach out to, you're probably going to get half of them calling you back or sending you an email, and then leverage those opportunities, because they may not have an opportunity, but they certainly will know someone who does, or will just impart some really good advice. And it's like a bit of a snowball. That's sort of how you build your network and build your knowledge base and get yourself a really good role.
Thank you. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention that EHRC's Empowering Futures program can also help cover the costs if you are doing a work integrated learning like a co-op position or a paid internship. I know that the economy can seem tough right now, but we have funding available. So if you're speaking to an employer in the sector and you're looking at getting something that you can do to build your skills and learn so that you can secure a career in the field, let them know that EHRC has funding called Empowering Futures that can cover up to half the costs of your placement. So with that, thank you again, Nirav, for joining us. I really appreciate you taking the time to share your insights as an HR executive for a leading utility. OPG is such a leader in this field, and to hear about the way that you do things there provides a really great example for the young people joining us today to learn about what they could be doing with their careers. With that, I'm now going to invite our Director of Programs, Mark Japeski, to say a few comments and wrap up today's event.
Thanks, Alex. Thanks, Nirav. So I have the pleasure of sort of summarizing everything that we've discussed today. Jumpstart your career. Careers can start anywhere, and there are all kinds of opportunities out there. The future of energy is changing. Energy and electricity demand is only set to increase. Electrification, digitization, grid security, traditional grids to bidirectional. It sounds simple, but it's going to be incredibly complicated, and we need smart people to help solve some of these problems. Mackenzie raised issues of safety concerns and bidirectional power flow. Renewables is growing. Nuclear has big changes and big innovations coming in the area of small modular reactors, the big refurb that's happening in Ontario, and of course, fusion is always on everyone's agenda and has been for years. This sector is going to be a primary industry involved in carbon emission reductions. There is and will be a need for hard skills, and growth in a career is actually connected to your softer professional skills, like teamwork, communication, critical thinking, things like that. Classic engineering disciplines are needed, civil, mechanical, electrical, etc. But we also need things in the areas of AI, robotics, data management, those kinds of things as well. There are a remarkable number of places to start in energy. You could be an English major, you could be an engineer, you could jump into government relations, or you could go into regulatory affairs, or communications, business development, finance, technicians, technologists, the multitude of trades that are in the sector. Ways to start could include apprenticeships, it could include co-ops, it could include internships, summer jobs. On the subject of co-ops and internships, if you have an opportunity, jump at it. If you learn nothing else, to borrow from one of our panelists, you may learn how to use Outlook and possibly how to send an email correctly. There's an important role in the translation of technical documents on the subject of communication skills, translating really technical language and solving problems, but conveying that in a clear and concise way that can cross disciplines and different departments and groups. COVID-19 has had an impact on the sector, particularly in the area of collaboration. So for anyone starting in the industry, it's very possible you'll be starting virtually, and that could be difficult. So look for those opportunities to connect in new and different ways. One of the things that one of the panelists mentioned was taking care of your own mental health. Burnout is real, and it's important to take care of yourself and do the things that recharge you at the end of the day, or even at the beginning of the day, as the case may be. Sometimes our careers take surprising twists and turns. If it was nothing else we heard, that was one of the things that some of the panelists and some of the speakers said. And that's okay. It allows us to find work we really believe in, follow our passions, and that sort of thing. And one of the last things I would say is invest in yourself. Continuous learning is really important. To borrow a euphemism from another industry, we are each pilots of our own career journey. And in closing, I'd just like to thank all of our panelists and our speakers. Michelle, you made a really good point. One of the last things you said was on the subject of diversity, equity, and inclusion. The things that make us different are also our superpowers. And I would just remind everyone, keep that in mind as you're applying for work and as you're looking for work in this industry. Narav, you've made some really good points about safety in particular, about networking, the importance of networking, but before even networking, doing your research, understanding the industry, understanding the companies that you're really interested in joining, so that the questions as you're networking are educated questions. They're the ones that really get the person you're networking with interested in what's going on. Contract work is another great way to start out. And you really emphasize safety. And I would reiterate that. You cannot emphasize safety enough for this sector. It's incredibly, incredibly, incredibly important. To all of the members of the panel, our vision at EHRC is keeping the lights on in Canada by preparing and empowering a world-class workforce for the entire electricity industry. And each of you are, in fact, the definition of that. You are a world-class group of panelists, and I cannot thank you enough for joining us today and sharing your own work experiences, your own starting career journeys. It's very, very much appreciated. And finally, to all of the viewers that joined us today and are hanging on for that last 60 seconds as I close, thank you so much for being with us. On behalf of EHRC and the Energy Council of Canada, thank you, stay safe, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.